Guitar legend Eddie Van Halen died of cancer today. Few could match his speed or his influence to an entire generation of guitarists.
Eddie Van Halen wasn't just a guitar legend, he was a living force who reshaped rock music forever. But behind the riffs, the solos, and the electrifying performances lay a story far darker than fans ever imagined. For years, rumors swirled about his health, his private struggles, and the final moments of the man who changed the sound of an entire generation. Now, shocking new details have emerged, and they are more devastating than anyone could have anticipated. It's a story of talent intertwined with pain, of brilliance shadowed by personal battles, and of a life that left millions inspired yet haunted those closest to him. Sources close to Eddie have revealed moments leading up to his death that reveal just how intense his struggle had become, details that the public has never been told. Until now, fans thought they knew the story. A battle with cancer, a legendary career, a private family life. But the truth paints a far more complex picture of isolation, moments of regret, and the hidden battles that even fame and fortune couldn't shield him from. Tonight, for the first time, we uncover the devastating new details about Eddie Van Halen's death, the events, the secrets, and the heartbreak that surrounded the final days of a true rock icon. This isn't just another celebrity story. It's the story of a genius, a fighter, and a man whose last moments are finally coming to light. Eddie Van Halen's journey to rock stardom began long before the neon lights, screaming fans, and sold-out arenas. Born in Amsterdam and raised in California, Eddie carried music in his blood. His father was a classically trained musician, and from an early age, Eddie absorbed the discipline, the structure, and the love for sound that would define his life. Yet, what made him extraordinary wasn't just skill, it was innovation. He didn't just play the guitar, he redefined it. The world had never seen the tapping technique he perfected, the lightning-fast runs, or the sheer creativity of a mind that refused limits. By the time Van Halen released their self-titled debut in 1978, Eddie had already become more than a guitarist. He was a force of nature. Songs like Eruption left audiences speechless, reshaping expectations of rock and establishing a legacy that would last decades. Fans adored him, critics celebrated him, and fellow musicians feared being left behind. But behind the power chords and stadium lights, Eddie's life was far from simple. The public saw a rock star living the dream: energy, success, wealth, and fame, but the reality behind the scenes was complicated. Eddie was a perfectionist, a man who demanded more from himself than almost anyone else could. Hours were spent tweaking solos, adjusting tone, and refining techniques until the sound matched the vision in his mind. His obsession fueled greatness, but it also brought stress, frustration, and intense personal pressure. Alongside the music came fame and its inevitable complications. Relationships strained under the weight of touring schedules. Friends and bandmates witnessed moods swinging between brilliance and volatility. Eddie's marriage and family life had moments of joy, but they also faced the strains of a man who often poured more of himself into music than into personal connections. Health, too, became a concern early on. Eddie developed serious issues with his fingers and arms, conditions caused in part by hours of relentless practice. Doctors warned him, but he pushed forward. Every performance, every recording session demanded total commitment. He was driven not just by ambition, but by a profound desire to perfect the sound he heard in his head. The world saw Eddie Van Halen as an untouchable icon, a hero who could make guitars scream and audiences cheer. But only a few understood the sacrifices behind that image. Nights alone, constant travel, and the pressure to constantly innovate weighed heavily on him. He loved music above all else. But the cost was clear. The man behind the guitar was human, vulnerable, and increasingly aware of the fragility of life. By the 1980s and 1990s, Eddie had solidified his status as a legend. Van Halen albums dominated charts, tours broke records, and the guitar community revered his every move. But even at the peak of his career, the shadow of health struggles loomed, and those close to him sensed an undercurrent of fragility that fans never saw. The story of Eddie Van Halen's rise is awe-inspiring, but it also sets the stage for the devastating events that would later unfold. Behind every thunderous solo and every stadium roar was a man confronting pain, vulnerability, and the relentless pressures of genius. The triumphs that made him immortal on stage were mirrored by personal battles that would eventually shape his final days and reveal the heartbreaking truth about his death. Even at the height of fame, Eddie Van Halen's life was a constant balancing act between brilliance and personal struggle. The world saw a rock icon, a man whose fingers could conjure magic from a guitar, a performer who electrified arenas and inspired generations. What fans didn't see were the battles he fought quietly. In rooms where no cameras rolled, Eddie's health issues were among the most hidden aspects of his life. Decades of relentless playing had taken a toll on his body. Fingers, wrists, and shoulders bore the scars of intense practice and performance. But those physical struggles were only part of the story. He had endured severe pain, sometimes hiding it even from his closest family members, pushing through shows and recording sessions with determination that bordered on obsession. Every solo, every riff, was a victory over the limitations his own body tried to impose. The shadow of illness didn't stop there. Eddie's fight with cancer was long, grueling, and largely private. For years, he battled a disease that threatened not only his life but also the very hands that defined him. Friends recall moments when he would arrive at studios, pale and weakened, yet insist on performing as if nothing was wrong. Those who worked closely with him saw the toll it took, how exhaustion and pain sometimes crept into his behavior, his moods, and even his interactions with bandmates. Yet beyond the physical, there were emotional battles as well. Fame brought isolation. While crowds cheered his name, the pressures of expectation weighed heavily. Eddie carried the weight of a legacy that could not be ignored. Every performance, every tour, every public appearance demanded perfection. That relentless pressure created stress and anxiety that he often managed alone. Close friends have admitted that the private Eddie, the one who worried about his mortality, his health, and his family was markedly different from the electric stage persona that captivated millions. Even his family felt the strain. While he shared laughter and love with his son Wolfgang and wife Janie, there were moments when Eddie's personal struggles created distance. Those closest to him understood the weight he carried daily, the constant tension between living for the music and living for himself. Balancing family, fame, and failing health became an almost impossible act. In addition to health and family pressures, Eddie struggled with the isolation that often comes with genius. His creativity demanded solitude, but solitude can become loneliness. The very mind that composed unparalleled guitar solos also wrestled with doubt, fear, and vulnerability. Fans imagined the carefree life of a rock star, but the reality was far more complex. A man achieving immortality on stage while grappling with fragility behind it. These hidden struggles intensified in the years leading up to his death. Those close to him noticed subtle changes, moments of quiet reflection, unusual fatigue, and a sense of urgency in his actions. He worked tirelessly on new music, pushing himself to create even as his body weakened. Every note recorded, every track perfected, became a testament to his dedication, but also a reflection of his unrelenting battle against time and mortality. And now, new details about his final days reveal the true gravity of Eddie Van Halen's situation. It wasn't just cancer. It wasn't just fatigue. It was the culmination of decades of physical strain, emotional burden, and the relentless demands of living as one of the most influential musicians in history. The public had seen his genius, but few realized the price he paid for it. Every riff, every solo. A battle against the inevitable. These struggles paint a picture not of weakness, but of courage. A man who gave everything he had to music, but of music to his fans and to the legacy he knew would outlive him. Yet in the shadows of his final days, those who knew him best discovered a side of Eddie Van Halen that the world had rarely witnessed. Fragile, human, and heartbreakingly devoted to the art that defined his life. As Eddie Van Halen's health declined, those closest to him began to realize the severity of his condition. While fans continued to celebrate his iconic performances and new releases, the private struggle he endured behind closed doors was far more devastating. Those who worked with him daily noticed subtle changes. His energy, once unstoppable, began to falter. His hands, once lightning fast, occasionally trembled. Yet Eddie, ever the perfectionist, refused to let anyone see the extent of his vulnerability. In his final months, Eddie's battle with cancer intensified. Treatment was grueling, exhausting both physically and emotionally. Friends described days where he would push himself to record in the studio despite immense pain, insisting that his music must continue even as his body rebelled. Every chord he played carried the weight of decades of labor, creativity, and personal sacrifice. Each performance became a testament to resilience, a defiance of the illness that threatened to claim him. Even amidst this struggle, Eddie remained deeply aware of his legacy. He understood the profound impact he had on music, how his techniques had inspired generations of guitarists, and how his presence shaped rock culture forever. But that awareness brought a silent burden. The thought of leaving unfinished projects, of not seeing his family grow, and of fading from the world that revered him weighed heavily on his mind. Eddie's final days were marked by both extraordinary moments of creativity and heartbreaking isolation. He continued to compose, often alone in the studio late into the night, experimenting with riffs and sounds that would never be heard by the public. Family members noticed that he cherished these quiet sessions, an escape from both pain and the demands of public life. Yet even in solitude, he was never truly alone. His legacy and influence hung over him like a shadow, a constant reminder of the expectations he had set for himself and those imposed by fans and peers alike. There were moments of fear and reflection. Friends recall him speaking candidly about mortality, acknowledging the fragility of life while maintaining an unwavering commitment to his art. He understood that time was no longer a luxury. The music that had once defined him now became both solace and reminder of life's impermanence. New details reveal the heartbreaking complexity of his final interactions. Visitors noted that Eddie's humor remained sharp, though tinged with melancholy. Conversations were often punctuated by quiet pauses, moments where he seemed lost in thought, perhaps reflecting on both triumphs and regrets. Even as his body weakened, his mind remained alert, his creativity undiminished and his spirit unbroken. The devastation came not just from the illness, but from the realization that his body could no longer match his ambitions. He was a man defined by motion, sound, and energy, yet now he faced the unthinkable, limitation. And in those final weeks, it became painfully clear how much the struggle had affected him, physically exhausted, emotionally drained, yet still striving to give everything he could to the music he loved. Eddie's last public appearances masked the intensity of this battle. Fans saw a familiar smiling icon. Those closest to him witnessed a different reality, a man confronting mortality, while clinging to the legacy he worked a lifetime to build. Every chord played, every note recorded was an act of defiance, a statement that his passion and brilliance could not be extinguished. Even as his health deteriorated, the final of Eddie Van Halen's life was not about fame or fortune, it was about courage, resilience, and a relentless devotion to the art that defined him. But the devastating details of his death revealed only recently show a side of Eddie that no fan could have imagined: human, fragile, and heartbreakingly heroic. The truth behind Eddie Van Halen's death is more heartbreaking than most fans could have imagined. For years, the public knew only part of the story: his battle with cancer, his legendary career, and the legacy of music he left behind. But new details reveal the depth of the struggle that had been hidden from view, showing a man who fought tirelessly, not just for life, but for the music that defined him. In the weeks leading up to his passing, Eddie faced complications that were far more severe than previously reported. Sources close to him revealed that his body was deteriorating at an alarming rate, a culmination of decades of relentless touring, relentless playing, and relentless self-demand. Every performance, every studio session had taken its toll. Musicians who worked with him later described him as fragile yet determined, a man who refused to surrender even when his body demanded it. But it wasn't just physical deterioration. Eddie experienced immense emotional strain. He was acutely aware of his mortality, and the knowledge that he could no longer play the way he once had haunted him. Friends reported that he often expressed frustration at his limitations, grief over unfinished projects, and fear for the family he loved deeply. The private pain was staggering, an internal battle that contrasted sharply with the confident, electrifying presence fans saw on stage. Family and close friends became his anchor, providing support while witnessing a side of Eddie the public had never seen. Moments of humor and warmth were punctuated by quiet periods of reflection, sadness, and vulnerability. Those closest to him observed how the struggle affected his day-to-day life. Reduced mobility, intense fatigue, and the constant medical interventions that reminded him and them of the fragility of life. The new revelations paint a picture of a man who gave everything he had until the very end. Eddie continued to work on music, to compose riffs, and to refine recordings, even in the face of severe pain. Every note was an act of resilience, a declaration that his spirit could not be extinguished. It was this combination of brilliance and vulnerability that made his final days so devastatingly emotional. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of the story is how private he remained about the severity of his condition. While fans speculated about his health, Eddie chose to shield the world from the full truth. He didn't want to be remembered as a man defeated by illness. He wanted to be remembered for his music, for the energy, passion, and innovation he brought to the world. His silence, however, meant that only those closest to him truly understood the gravity of his final struggle. These revelations also shed light on the emotional toll of fame. Eddie's life was lived in the spotlight, but illness brought with it isolation. Despite the adoration of millions, he faced some of his most challenging moments alone, navigating pain, reflection, and the weight of a legacy that had grown far beyond what he could control. The contrast between public adulation and private suffering underscores the profound human cost behind the life of a genius. In the end, the devastating truth about Eddie Van Halen's death is not just about illness. It's about a man who poured everything into his art, who confronted the fragility of life with courage, and who remained committed to his craft until the very last moment. Fans may mourn the loss of a guitar legend, but those who understand these hidden details mourn something deeper: the life of a man who fought, struggled, and triumphed in his own way. Even in the face of inevitable loss, Eddie Van Halen's music will live forever. But the new details of his final days remind the world that behind every genius is a human being, fragile, vulnerable, and heartbreakingly real. The world saw his electrifying solos, but now we finally understand the full weight of the man behind them.